Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe Imbriano, the Fullerton Informer. We're coming to you from the Fullerton Police Department, Fullerton, California, folks. Today is the 29th of August, 2018, and we're out here in front of the Fullerton Police Department's headquarters. And yes, you guessed it, Fullerton has made national headlines once again as it finds itself embroiled in another scandal. Fullerton's Police Chief, Dave Hendricks, has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation over allegations that he and another high-ranking Fullerton Police Department officer were involved in an alleged assault on two emergency medical technicians at a Lady Antebellum concert last Friday in Irvine. And the details, according to the report that have been made public by the Irvine City Council and some of the media outlets, is that Chief Hendricks' wife, who was in attendance at the concert with him, appeared to be in need of medical aid, and as the EMTs were rendering aid to his wife, it is allegedly reported that both Dave Hendricks, the Fullerton Police Department's Chief of Police, off-duty, assaulted the EMTs, and there are reports that they placed the EMTs in a chokehold. Now, what's happening right now in Fullerton is the middle of a cover-up, which is extremely typical of this department. We all know what happened when the police murdered Kelly Thomas, and that charade, that satanic charade, lasted for several years before the trial, where they were all acquitted as that man was beaten to death, brutally beaten to death and tortured by the cops. But what's happening right now is we have a situation where it is reported that the police chief and his associate, another Fullerton police officer, a very high-ranking Fullerton police officer, were removed from the concert venue as a result of their actions. And an investigation is pending right now, and we're not clear with whom, whether it's the Irvine Police Department or the District Attorney's Office. But at this point, there have been no arrests, and no charges have been filed. Now, I have a question for you. If you or I assaulted an EMT at a concert and the police showed up, which they did, the Irvine police responded to this call for assistance that involved two off-duty police officers allegedly assaulting EMT workers. In the course of rendering aid, ladies and gentlemen, that penal code section, I believe, is a little stiffer penalty than just 30 days in jail, okay? And I don't know if these guys were carrying their service weapons, but, you know, that's a whole nother discussion. But here's the thing. The cops showed up, and these guys allegedly assaulted two EMT workers from the concert venue. And basically what happened was the police came and responded, and no arrests were made. Now, let me ask you a question. How do you put someone in a chokehold and not go to jail for doing that? I mean, are these EMT workers allowed to have access to oxygen as they're rendering aid? We don't know the circumstances as to why the police chief's wife needed aid, but we do know that what happened resulted in the police showing up. How is it possible that you could do that to somebody and not get arrested? If you and I put somebody to chokehold, they would have you up on charges for attempted murder and in jail, no questions asked. But it's amazing how in this case now, the media, like the LA Times and the Register, which works very closely with law enforcement, because this is a law and order county, Orange County is really heavy on cop worship. And they shoot first and kill second and then ask questions later. That's just, and they get away with it. They get away with it. We're on the scene here where Kelly Thomas protests took place several years ago. And there were thousands of people lining the street here. And with all of that public outcry, we got a rigged trial. And Tony Rackauckus himself decided to try the case. And he set it up to fail, and he threw the case, and the cops walked. Well, in this case, now we have the media. Now we have the media calling this an altercation, calling this a disagreement. First they started out calling it an altercation. Now they're winding it down, calling it a disagreement between Chief Hendricks and the other Fullerton police officer and the EMT workers. So now, let me ask you a question. Since when does a disagreement involve a chokehold, allegedly? Since when does a disagreement involve a large number of Irvine police officers showing up to a concert? Since when does a disagreement involve assaulting EMT workers? And assault's an assault, ladies and gentlemen. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, but why is it not good when it comes to the police? Why is it that the police can get away with whatever they think they want to do? And why is it that the upper levels of the law enforcement apparatus and the criminal justice system in our county let them do that? Why do the police feel so empowered to get away with what they get away with? 2 years ago, just under 2 years ago, I was running for office in the city of Fullerton for the Fullerton City Council. And on election night, of course, I lost because I didn't have the backing of the police union and the fire union and all the money that goes along with that, because let's face it, these guys are making tons of dough and they got nice contracts, and they don't want someone coming around and sniffing around the books and looking at all the giveaways, and that's what I was going to do. And I'll be back in 2020. I'm going to run again. But on election night, they were having a victory party for some of the candidates, and the city manager was out having drinks at one of the restaurants, and apparently he had one too many. And so his name is Joe Fells. He was the city manager. I think it was November 4th, 2016. And he was driving home in his minivan. And apparently what happened was he lost control of the van and ran it up on a curb and ran over a tree. And then he struggled to break the vehicle free from being lodged on the tree stump over the curb. And so for a short period of time, he was putting the car in and out of reverse, revving up the engine and apparently squealing the tires. And the panic, frantic homeowner called the police. And the Fullerton police dispatched 2 squad cars. And as they arrived, Joe Fells managed to break his van free and was driving away from the scene of an accident. Yes, it was a property damage situation where he drove and ran over a tree and began driving away. And when he was pulled over by the police, they had no idea who he was. They were responding to a homeowner's call. What did he do? He got out of the car and he smelled like alcohol. And the first thing he says is call the chief. Call Dan Hughes, the police chief at the time. Dan Hughes gets on the phone, apparently, and gives orders to a sergeant and make sure that no breathalyzer is done and that no field sobriety test is to be conducted by those officers until Dan Hughes, quote unquote, sends his guy out there. I'm not sure of the time frame, but I believe it was Sergeant Corbett that arrived. I'm going from memory right now. And Sergeant Corbett apparently administered a field sobriety test, not a blood alcohol or a breathalyzer, I believe several hours later, and not in the presence of other officers, and cleared Joe Fells and drove him home. So the guy runs away from the scene of an accident after smashing his car. Smells like booze when he gets out, and the cops give him a ride home. You want to know something, ladies and gentlemen? I will tell you a little story about this police department. They're dangerous. They've killed people. I'm sitting here in front of a facility called the Fullerton Police Department, where there was a man named Dean Gochiner who was arrested for a DUI and brought into the jail. This was several years ago, about 7 years ago. Typical DUI arrest, put in a cell by himself. And apparently in the morning he was dead. Now this was before the murder of Kelly Thomas by the police department. I believe several months prior to that. But Dean Gochiner was arrested on a DUI charge, put in booked, and kept in the cell. And in the morning he was dead. Apparently they claim he committed suicide. Now there was an officer in charge of taking care of him that night. I believe his name was Vince Mader. And it was revealed and publicized that he had smashed his digital audio recording device that contained conversations between him and other people in the jail, including police officers that night. In other words, all the recordings of his interactions that night with the prisoner, Dean Gochiner, were destroyed. He smashed his digital audio recorder to destroy whatever evidence was on there that could potentially have implicated him into the death of Dean Gochiner. And so what happened? Dean's dead. The cop doesn't go to jail. A couple months later, a homeless man's reported to be trying car doors down in the parking lot by the slide bar. The police show up, play mind games with him, put the gloves on. One of the police officers, Manny Ramos, says, "You see these gloves? You see these fists? Quote unquote, they're about to F you up." And they began playing a series of mind games on Kelly Thomas. And you can watch the video for yourself, but go into prayer before you do it. But the point I'm making is the district attorney had no problem letting Vince Mader get away with what he did. Around the same time, there was a guy named Beth Mam who was downtown in Fullerton, not too far from where I'm standing, just a little behind these buildings. In the bar scene down here, it's really lively at night on the weekends. He was filming a fight. And he was filming the arrest when the police showed up, when they were trying to break up this fight. And he was filming an officer who was getting kind of rough with somebody. And then another officer went up and knocked the phone out of his hand after he told him to stop filming, which he has every right to do, by the way. And then he grabbed him and he threw him around like a rag doll, threw him up against the car and arrested him, took him to jail, and then falsified a police report that said Beth Mam jumped on the officer's back and attacked him. Well, little did these officers know from the Fullerton Police Department that somebody had picked up the phone and continued recording. Now, to tell you how corrupt the Fullerton Police Department and our district attorney is, that video was sent to the district attorney, clearly showing that the police officer that was involved at that time, I believe his name was Hampton, falsified a police report. And the facts that were in that police report were inconsistent with the video evidence. And the district attorney, Mr. Tony Rakakis, and the prosecutor still brought charges against Beth Mam. And Beth Mam had to get a lawyer and went to jail when he didn't even do anything illegal. And he spent time in jail and spent thousands of his own dollars. And the district attorney still brought charges, even though they were presented with video evidence that showed that the police had framed him. What does that tell you about the criminal justice system in Orange County, California, ladies and gentlemen? What does that tell you about the police department? What does that tell you about the integrity of the people that are sworn to uphold the law and have arrest powers? It tells me that they abuse it on a regular and frequent basis. Now, back to this issue with Joe Fells. That DUI that turned into a wet reckless that was given a $250 fine, and that was the end of it. There was an investigation at the district attorney's office as they were forced to look into this because of public pressure, some from my website, some from other websites, and some from public outcry, and some from media pressure. The district attorney's office assigned a special investigator to investigate the obstruction of justice that took place that night in the chain of command of the Fullerton Police Department that involved high-ranking officers of the FPD. How is it possible that 4 officers show up at the scene of a hit and run and the suspect gets out of his car smelling like booze and he doesn't immediately get the cuffs put on him and a breathalyzer administered? No, because he's the city manager, folks. He's their boss. I thought they were supposed to uphold the law equally and just for everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I thought that was what they were supposed to do. I wonder what Wayne Bornhoft would think of this if he knew about what was going on inside this house of horrors. Well, the special investigator for the district attorney's office, his name is Ibrahim Beate. I've come in here several times requesting that obstruction of justice charges be filed against the police chief, Dan Hughes at the time, along with a colleague of mine, Barry Levinson. We returned here not once but twice to get that done. They refused to take the report. We were both times referred to Mr. Beate to contact him for details surrounding how this was being handled. Mr. Beate would not get on the phone with me. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Abraham, whatever his first name is. And he was quoted as saying that we're not going to investigate this because Dan Hughes is his friend. That was quoted by another employee of the district attorney's office, Mr. Albert Santos, who happens to have a lawsuit going against the district attorney's office for the way he was treated. He was a prosecutor and an investigator. So, you know, we have their own people turning against their own people over there, and yet at this point we're going almost on 2 years. In November it will be 2 years, and the statute of limitations for obstruction of justice will have been run. The clock will have been run out for felony obstruction of justice charges to be filed. The district attorney still refuses to discuss this matter. I contacted the district attorney's office and spoke with the assistant DA. It's a gal that Rackauckus is seen very frequently with in public, who happens to head up the sex trafficking investigation unit of the district attorney's office. And she told me that this was being investigated, and in a nonchalant and cavalier way she said good luck, as if she meant it like good luck. Look, folks, we've got a situation on our hands here where the police have gotten away with murder not once but twice since I've been coming to these city council meetings. I know of 2 murders that were committed by the police department, and it was amazing that they got away with both of them. And then we have a clear-cut case of just knucklehead corruption when they give a drunk driver a ride home and they tell each other to cover it up. They tell the crime scene investigator not to take photos. They're told to turn off their digital audio recording devices during this supposed investigation of the suspect, Joe Fells, the city manager. Look, and now we got the police chief, who's only been working here a few months, who's making like $30,000 a month in pay and benefits to the taxpayer and his pal. I mean, I think we're spending $2,000 a day on paid leave for these guys to stay home. When is justice ever going to be served in Fullerton, ladies and gentlemen? Why is it that Fullerton is so corrupt? Why is it that people in this community are not outraged over this behavior? Maybe that is why they think they can get away with this, because they feel nobody's watching them. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason I'm making this video and I'm dedicating 15 or 20 minutes of my time this evening to put this out there is that we have the ability to affect change in our government and in our nation. And if we can't clean up the mess at the very lowest level, our local police department, who are we kidding when we salute the flag? We're deceiving ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, because people died barefoot in the snow under a blue sky on a blanket of snow. They bled out on the snow, fighting for our rights to be free and for justice and for liberty. And justice is not something that is being dispensed by our criminal justice system. And liberty is under attack by tyrants who murder and frame and maim under the color of authority and the color of law. We must be eternally vigilant against the deceptive practices of those we blindly trust and expose the dark deeds of those who take men and women's lives, who are innocent until proven guilty, and who go off into the sunset with obscene pensions and retirement plans. Yes, Fullerton once again is embroiled in another scandal, ladies and gentlemen. And once again it involves the Fullerton Police Department. And one has to wonder whether this place will ever change. I can assure you that if it soon does not change, then this building will no longer be a police department, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that the Fullerton Police Department is completely disbanded and we subcontract the entire operation out to the Orange County Sheriff's Department. We have way too much corruption going on. We have way too much cronyism and nepotism going on. We have way too many deceptive practices and falsification of police reports taking place here. And one too many people have been murdered by these people. One murder is too many, ladies and gentlemen. It could happen to you or yours. This is Joe Brianna, the Fullerton Informer, coming to you live from the Fullerton Police Station in Fullerton, California. And I just want you all to understand that we're not alone. We are united by our belief in Almighty God and the pursuit of truth and justice and the American way, folks. And the American way is under attack unless we defend it. God bless you all and good night.